Right, good morning, folks, and welcome to Keeping Up with the Kantarians. Great to have you here, and we're going to take you through this 50 minutes with a great selection of Kantara members and speakers. So you're going to have a lot of rotation around here in the on the podium, but also we have Andrew Hughes, Leadership Council Chair, who doesn't want to get onto the podium, so he's going to sit there. So first up, just to give me an idea of the knowledge base here, how many folks have heard of Kantara? Okay, so that's good. That's probably 2/3, 3/4 of you. That's great. Okay, in terms of those who are Kantara members and Kantara non-member participants in work groups, could you stand up, please? Could you stand up? Okay, so we've got a lot of heard of and just a few. Remember, folks, these are the people that you go and talk to. President Allen, Steve Wilson over there, and IDM Andrew, Leadership Council Chair. Thank you so much. That's great. So that's going to give you a sense of folks to come and talk to later on. So what we're going to do here is take you through an introduction of Kantara, and then we're going to actually talk about some specifics that we have along the way. You're going to, incidentally, how many of you were with the at the morning session, which was the introduction to, what was it called? Identity 101. That the Pam Dingle, Ian Glazer, you were, right, okay, well clearly you were there, right. That gives us a sense. So some of the things that were talked about, particularly in Pam's presentation, sort of at least referred to, but not specifically, we're going to talk about here. So consent was brought up by Ian and also by Pam, and also authorisation, delegated authorisation. You're going to hear about, although she didn't mention the consent receipt or UMA, you're going to hear about those particular things, those particular specifications and how they're being deployed in other places apart from Microsoft. So from that perspective, let me take things off. My name is Colin Wallis. I'm the Executive Director of Kantara, and with me on this esteemed panel is Ian Glazer from ID Pro. You've already probably got to know him because, you know, Kantara incubated ID Pro. Thomas Hardjono from MIT. He's going to lead the user managed access part of the presentation. Mike Cook from Identos. Mike and Identos have deployed UMA in Canada in multiple instances. Be sure to catch Identos's catch them at the Identos UMA2 Interop demo, which is at about 3. It's later, mid-afternoon, isn't it? Maybe 2 o'clock. Yeah. Tim Reiniger, our business legal framework. He's going to talk about the UMA legal aspects. And Catherine Shilton, who's going to talk to us about Kantara's assurance program, or some of the tensions around assurance and certification. So that's the way it's rocking. So let's keep up. I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of Kantara and sort of kind of set the context, as it were. So that's what we do, and that's our mission statement, and fundamentally we're the only folks that actually put both digital identity and personal data privacy inside the scope of their organisation. So a lot of non-profits in this space tend to just focus on identity, and privacy and personal data agency is an afterthought, certainly not in Kantara. We have that very much dead square and centre in everything that we do. If you were going to put Kantara on a page, it would be sort of kind of something like this. It's 3 organisations, actually, 3 separate organisations, 2 in the US and 1 in Thailand and Estonia to cover Europe. So from that perspective, we do, interestingly, we don't necessarily cover the world, but we do have members all around the world, from down into Asia Pacific, an increasing number in Europe, and of course pretty heavyweight into North America, US and Canada. it's a commons-based organisation. So remember I asked those people, non-member participants, to stand up, because you can actually contribute into Kantara specifications and community work with no cost at all. And that's that's usually the way, or often the way, that folks begin their journey with Kantara, is in those community working groups. Obviously it'd be lovely to have your money and sort of kind of work that, because we do need that to keep the organisation going. But unlike other hard-out pay-to-play organisations in the identity space, we don't insist on payment for some aspects. So, and that way we actually get very good quality, because we get very good experts that are not necessarily corporate members having to coming and contributing and volunteering their knowledge to what we do. So we're much appreciative of that. Just the couple of other things to remember is that we do have very formal liaisons with ISO, SC27. We work with OECD, and we've been invited back again with Uncitrall. So this sort of gives you a sense of the credibility that Kantara carries in the world. We have the ISO, we have the consent receipt is now in ISO 29184, online privacy notices and consent, gives you an idea. UMA is in IETF, and we're looking to see how that goes in future. You can see some of our liaisons, and of course we have ID Pro along with a number of others. We have Karen Alliance in the room. Yes, that's right, put up your hand there. A few others, DIAC, and so on. Okay, international membership, pretty much on all of these lines you'll find all corners of the world represented. Interestingly, we have a number of government agencies with Kantara as well. This partly comes out of our international focus, I guess, and some of our earlier work, which was around SAML. It's interesting, a lot of folks, and OpenID Connect is great. And, the notion of SAML being dead, which I think, how long ago was that now? 5 years? Yeah, it must have been, yeah. SAML is dead, yeah, right. So how much SAML is still around? And the point is, a responsible organisation says, oh no, it's is not going to say, oh no, it's dead. You actually have to do some stuff, right? You have to bring the governments who are often using SAML2 together with the higher education federations which are using SAML2, bring them together so that they can form one profile to allow vendors who are spending less and less time on SAML have one profile to target against. After all, they're not doing refreshes that often anymore. So I've just got to remember those things because that's what we do. We look after our members and their interests. So to give you a sense of this is the sort of kind of reasons why folks join Kantara, both as individuals and as corporates. And there's a case that President Allen always brings up, that it's of an organisation, not by an organisation. So often when an organisation wants to, has a good idea, wants to influence it, wants to drive it forward, you can do that on its own, in its own website, or it can join an organisation like Kantara to do that. It could join FIDO Alliance, it could join OpenID Foundation, OIX, various others. The thing about it is you've got to think about where your competitive advantage is, and often it's if you've got a message that you want to put out, but that's going to be diluted to an extent because you've actually got your direct competitors involved in the same organisation. Think about that carefully, because the way that Kantara works is it allows you to have a relative freedom in the way of bringing some of that work forward. So as we go, we're just going to hopefully show you a little bit about Kantara. It's 10 years old as of Monday last week. So not so bad, really, for an organisation that's mostly volunteer-driven with some corporate support to enable that. So we feel that we've achieved quite a lot this year. I won't talk to you too much about the organisation structure. It's really much a bicameral system where the Leadership Council that runs the working groups is effectively autonomous from the board that actually looks after the programs and oversees the finances and so on. Basically, this is what we do. We nurture, develop and operate. You've got a sense of that. We bring in new ideas, typically blank sheets of paper in the industry, and we start to create something where there was nothing. Consent receipt's a classic case where it's gone literally from Mark Lazar's good idea back in the information sharing group before it was consent, and moving that up, and now it's an ISO standard. So that sort of kind of gives you a sense of it. We develop those things and we operate trust frameworks, assurance programs, certification, and so on. So these are the three things that we're typically known for, and you'll hear a lot more about them as we go forwards. These are typically the folks that are on our. These are the folks on our assurance program. They're either approved credential service providers and identity providers, or they're assessing for us. And typically these are the folks, and we have some of them on the podium here, who deploy Kantara's specifications. We also have an educational foundation based here in DC that's quite separate from the industry association that you're hearing about today, and we're really in the public good charity and educational space. And finally in Europe, these are the things that we do in Europe. We're deeply associated with EMA, a strong partner of Kantara's there, and we're also doing Horizon 2020 grant funding out of NGI Trust and future NGI programs for H2020. So nurture, develop and operate is what we do, and with that I'm going to pass you on to Ian Glazer.
All right, thanks so much. The clicker, sir. Thank you. All right, hey everybody. I'm Ian Glazer, founder and president of ID Pro. I was the editor of the Identity Relationship Working Group, RM Working Group, back in the day when we were still active on that. And I want to give you a very, very fast update on ID Pro. As you know, well, basically the big update is a big, big thank you to Alan. So Alan, as our relationship, as we were incubated by Kantara, Alan was a part of our board, ID Pro's board. And Alan has been a font of great advice when we can find him enough to give it, but has been absolutely a gold mine for us. So the organization formally thanks Alan for his help and continues our alliance with Kantara. There's plenty of other ID Pro content this week. Tomorrow, Sarah Cacchetti and Heather Flanagan will give you some of that. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off.
You're actually handing it left.
All right, hold on. Let me give you a tiny little teaser.
Oh, right.
I forgot about this. Sorry. So we have over 50 sessions that are run by ID Pro members. As the professional organization for identity management, it is amazing to me to see how many of our members are now on stage presenting to other practitioners so that they can learn from one another. As I hand left, see, I'm going to do the transition here. There's a bunch coming up. There's a plenary tomorrow. Our Body of Knowledge Committee is meeting, and there is a happy hour that hopefully you've all registered for on Wednesday. And last but not least, a professional development track on Friday. With that, now I'm going to hand left to Thomas. And the clicker.
Okay, and the clicker, and is it the next slide deck? We're just going to change decks here.
Oh, let him change it. Oh.
Yeah, you can't click yet. We're just going to load up the next one. So what you're going to hear about, Thomas is the co-chair of the User Managed Access Work Group, and he's going to just walk you through, with his two colleagues, he's going to walk you through the work that's going on there.
So I don't know if I should be happy or sad. It's 10 years since UMA was brought up. MIT first joined towards the end of 2009. Which is feels like yesterday, but I assume people here understand at least basically how OAuth works. Yeah. So OAuth enables you to do constrained delegation. So the original model was that you want to give authority to your mobile app to access, say, a resource, my Google Calendar. So you own sort of both sides of the equation. It's flexible. It's good. We won't go there, but I think it needs more work. Then OpenID Connect came, which is an excellent use of the OAuth model. So OpenID Connect allows you to use the OAuth constructs as a means to do identity federation. And one of the interesting things that OpenID Connect introduced was this ID token structure, so that when you have an ID token and you give it to a relying party, you guys know what a relying party is, the relying party can feed it to a standardized API at the identity provider and get information about who you are. Please, first name, last name, email, I think phone number, maybe institution. So there's a table 5.1 in the spec has got a dozen, I think, attributes, and I think 5 or 6 are mandatory. So, so now comes UMA. So one of the things that got us interested in UMA in 2009 was this idea of how you allow people to get access to your data, let's just say, your resources that are distributed throughout the internet. So right now, if I want to give Ian access to my calendar, I have to go into, say, Google Calendar and do so. If I want to, add Ian to whatever Yahoo images, I have to go in. So the end user has to go in there like X number of times, 10 times to do the same thing, right? So it's just too much. So could we use the OAuth construct and rely on the OpenID Connect assertions to allow me to share resources with different parties? So in this case, the requesting party there is Bob. It looks like a Bob. Okay. Should I point it? Okay. So
yeah, we can work out which is Bob. Yeah.
Okay. So we can work it out. Alice. So Alice is the resource owner, and so Alice has let's make it concrete. A data set. The calendar is kind of boring, low value, low risk. Alice has a data set. Now Bob comes along and says, look, I want to use, I already have OAuth, I already have tokens, I have ID tokens. Now I want to access your resource, Alice. And Alice says, well, great. I am going to make you go through the motions of OAuth and ID token, and then I will issue you and your client with a specific UMA token that you can then deliver a wheel to these resource servers. So in effect, what you're doing is a distributed authorization model. So my resources are distributed. I want to just authorize once. I say, well, I know who Bob is, I know his credentials, I'm going to give him access to these bottom 3 resource servers, whatever's there. If you know the OAuth token, there is a scope field there, and you can do fine grain if you want. So I could say, well, I can either give Bob access to the entire resource server or certain directories or certain data types. Okay, so the UMA user experience opportunities. So plenty of places for UMA to be activated or enabled, so at least at the user side. So the bottom there is Bob has a confidential app, right? So Alice can say, well, at runtime, or Alice can say, well, I know Bob is my tennis partner, I'll just pre-approve him. Or I can say, well, I don't know who Bob is, but I kind of, he's my old, school friend from Facebook. Okay, I kind of know, okay, I'll approve afterwards. And the cool thing is you can monitor this, and I can withdraw consent at any time. So benefits for the service providers, true secure delegation. So you heard about no passwords, yeah, we like that. Scale permissioning through self, you're actually doing this yourself as the resource owner. And the resources are distributed throughout the internet, which is a cool thing. And the last thing, keep calm and prepare for GDPR. So compliance is going to be a big thing. I think we're going to have a federal privacy law, but there's a different presentation, let's say, and we want to be ready for that day, right? Benefits for the individual. So individual can choose. Convenience. So you don't have to be influenced by whatever social media platform you're actually using to give consent. It's centralizable if you want to. Particularly important when you're doing monitoring. Like, okay, I can't remember did I give Ian access? Did I give Mike access? I can't remember. I just want to go to one spot and I can check. And you can control the fine-grained access of this. Now, known implementation. So this is a list of companies and organizations.
It's not exclusive either, actually.
It's not exclusive, and Mike is going to talk about Identiverse. And so we invite you to check this out. Many of these are actually open source. We actually have a UMA 1.0 open source at MIT. You know, if you guys want to give us money, we'll do an UMA 2.0. We're open to checks. UMA in a nutshell. So this is the list of milestones. Version 1 was done in 2015. I'm co-author of version 1. Version 2 was just done last year, which is awesome. Leverages existing OAuth constructs. Some of the specs have been contributed to the ITF, so if you look at the current specs, the same thing is uploaded at the ITF website. There's a lot of 1.1, one-to-one interrupt testing right now, and more will come soon.
And here he is. Mike Cook from Identiverse is going to just walk you through their implementation. Thank you.
The 3-minute version, yeah. So we're a digital identity and consent solution provider here in Canada, or up in Canada. And by and large, we're focused on the healthcare environment, trying to unlock data ecosystems where healthcare data can be consumed by a number of relying parties for our clients. We're pretty big in the community of practice, so we sit on a handful of and participate in a handful of communities as part of our work. Really, we try to help bring identity assurance providers to the table, where we can leverage a distributed mobile wallet architecture, which is an extension that we're proposing with Kantara's UMA, to share authorization servers and to create a point of interoperability between authorization servers for some of our healthcare customers, providing explicit compliance and authorization of consent at a very granular level. Actually, for all the reasons that Thomas mentioned earlier, why UMA is a really good strength for our customers to set up a healthcare ecosystem where data resources are spread across public and private sector, and sometimes in the hands of the resource owner themselves. And our end goal, our customer's goal, is to enable that kind of trusted ecosystem, and moreover, a marketplace. So Niagara Health is one of our lead customers up in Ontario. They're delivering kind of mobile-first digital architecture to bring a suite of healthcare solution providers to the region. Their motto is come to Niagara for the wine and stay for the healthcare. They're essentially inviting innovative application developers to come to their community and build innovative apps. And they're taking care of the identity, the consent through their mobile Niagara Navigator, and giving them access to users through their marketplace, the mobile navigator. So why UMA? It's user-directed sharing of health data, which is really important. Most of the health sits with the Ontario government or with the hospital. Sharing from party to party. They do not want to build every healthcare app for diabetes or any other thing. They want to bring an ecosystem around the data. Relying party integration, like we can give a really clean integration that doesn't require app developers to learn cryptography, as an example. Choice of authorization server. They're one of 6 hospitals in the region, and they've got the ability to navigate a single user experience across multiple authorization servers. And then, of course, very fine-grained control of resources. So opting in for some of your data to be shared to participate in a trial, opting back out after you don't see the results, or opting to share more information after you do see results. Why Identiverse? So we bring this kind of mobile wallet and discovery and single sign-on together to a community. So we enlighten the community with hey, what's available to me? How do I discover both the services as well as discover my resources? Because that's actually a hurdle in the flow. We want to balance the cost and effort by presenting a hub and spoke model, and make sure we have strong revocation and enforcement. The result is a user-centric ecosystem and better care, a growing number of service providers, and very, very controlled access to patient data, which today is locked down under lock and key. And the end state for them is really this ecosystem where mobile navigator is helping patients find the services they're looking for and easily link those services up with the data they need to provide them value. And of course, the identity assurance providers are an input into the system. Niagara will identity proof people, but so will our partners like SecureKey and others in the region who provide strong credentials. And I'm going to pass left.
Indeed. Thank you. Thanks so much, Mike. That gives you a good sense of one deployer's story of why UMA, why doing asynchronous sharing. So onwards to the legal business legal business framework aspect of UMA. Please, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, and congratulations again on your 10th anniversary of Kantara.
Right, yes. Well, along with Identiverse, here we all are.
Well, also, I will say, as a lawyer, a person in the legal profession, it has been a great privilege to work on this project. I do want to call out Eve Mailer, who's sitting in the back of the room.
Where are you, Eve?
Who's
Okay,
conceived
in the
this
corner,
really brilliant
right.
program. And sitting next to her, by the way, is Tom Smedinghoff, the other person I've had the great privilege of working with on issues of identity federation, digital identity, which complements this work. And you'll be hearing from him and some other panels at Identiverse. So anyway, coincidentally, they're sitting next to each other in the back. And so when Uma and Kantara contacted me about mapping the legal issues to Uma, I had to look to history. And history, not just last year or 5 years ago, in some cases, thousands of years of legal experience. And so really, the mapping has become easy when one does that. And I'm not even trying to be funny when I say that, but the legal system has had a long experience with how to facilitate commerce, how to enable reciprocity, objectivity, autonomy for people trading various goods, going back thousands of years of maritime law, real property law, and these principles can be brought to bear with UMA. So we're not looking at having to go out and create new legislation to do this.
It's mapping it on, really. It's mapping the UMA terms onto the legal terms in legislation.
That's right.
Yep.
So what that means is when and UMA talks about the resource owner, it's a very broad concept which is very powerful. And from legal terms, and I've tried to give the others to you, it can be, of course, the natural person, but in many cases, I think many of you in this room probably have been a parent or are parents, and so you have legal responsibility. You have what's called guardianship over a minor. So it's the minor would be the data subject in that case, but you are the one with the legal responsibility. You would be the one to appoint agents to delegations in this context. Also, we know of situations where the data subject has passed away. There are still issues of the informational rights that go on have to be dealt with by executors, personal representatives. The authorization server is at the center of the whole UMA scheme. And really, in legal terms, this is an agent for the resource owner. And this has, the concept of agents, by the way, in history has been, it's one of the most powerful legal concepts because it extends a legal personality in space and time. It's been very powerful and very powerful to leverage for UMA. And finally, we've heard about consent. Lots of legal advantages to consent. We are, in this case, looking to leverage what all of you in the room have probably dealt with, software licensing, the concept of licensing, again, a very centuries-old concept, leveraged very much now in our digital age, at central importance to our digital transformation. And so with these tools, we achieve, when Kantara first contacted me, how do we achieve asynchronous consents, dynamic identity relationships, diachronic permissions, a fancy word for how the permissions and their meanings would need to be change over time and be enforceable over time. All of this is achieved legally through existing legal tools mapped over to UMA.
And with that, of course, we're going to talk about, UMA has a consent built in. It has a process for that. We're going to talk about the Kantara's consent receipt, which is actually a different approach to consent in a standalone sense. Andrew Hughes.
Hi, everyone. Just waiting for the slides to come up. Hughes. I'm here to talk to you about a new concept. And this is a bit of a teaser for the session that I'm going to run on Friday morning, a few hours after the wind-up party on Thursday night. So I expect we're taking names, so everyone should be there as well. Just waiting for the slides.
Still working on those. Not long now.
Anyways, in February 2018, the Kantara Consent and Information Sharing Workgroup published a specification called the Consent Receipt Specification version 1.1. It encapsulates all the things that you would normally see in a privacy notice that you agree to whenever you click on buttons saying, I agree, or OK. What we've done is created a specification that allows interoperable exchange of these consent receipts and records of action between service providers. And that's what I'm going to show you here.
That's right. It's about 3 slides in or something, yeah.
Okay. So what does an interoperable standard mean, specification mean? Really, for success, it means that you're taking a simple approach, standardized data format, forming the basis and the foundation for innovation. I cannot predict what you will invent because you have a standardized way of capturing and expressing a user's consent action. Okay, I lied. I'm not talking about specification. What I'd like to talk about is, what's a receipt? Anyone heard of the concept of receipt before? That's what we're going to talk about right now. So, take the concept of personal data out of your heads right now. This is not about clicking OK to transfer personal information. This slide is just about a sales receipt. Everyone knows that concept. Sales receipt pretty much always has it's a personal record which is independent of the issuer of that receipt. When you buy something, you get a copy, they get a copy. It's some sort of evidence of the event. There's transactional information, metadata, other information about what just happened. And very importantly, in the specifications that we will talk about, there's pointers at the policy statements. So to put context around the receipt, does anyone not know what a sales receipt is? I hope. Okay,
Everyone knows. So.
We've developed this thing called the agreement flow. It's very, very simple. You will all have seen it. You will all recognize it. A service provider makes a service available. There's no personal data involved here. A person says, oh, I'd like to try that. Okay, so they discover it. They ask for the service. The provider says, oh, here's some notices, legal statements, all that sort of stuff. And here's how much it's going to cost you. $5 for the widget. Person says, nah, it's too expensive. Cancel. Well, that's not interesting. What's more interesting is when they say yes. You establish an agreement. The provider says, okay, here's the thing, and you agree to pay me $5 for it. Okay, everyone's okay with the terms? Let's proceed. You intentionally enter into an agreement and move on. The provider always has to keep a record. Mandatory. If you sell something, your accountant really wants you to keep the record. So does the tax authority. You exchange valuable consideration. Here's the widget, here's the $5, agreement ends. That is the agreement flow. These are the things I just mentioned. These are the important things in an agreement flow. Offer and acceptance of terms and so on. Okay, so you all know what a sales receipt is. Who knows what a personal data receipt is? No one, right? Because we just invented it at Kantara, February 2018. In law, you're required in many places to offer a sales receipt when selling things. Why is there no personal data receipt? When you give personal data for processing, why don't you get a receipt? When you hand your luggage to the hotel concierge, you get a receipt for your bag. Why don't you get it for your social insurance number? When personal data is involved, privacy laws kick in. You're required to give notices about the policies, the purposes, the data controllers, the bodies and entities involved, and then all the other stuff that the privacy lawyers understand, and we listen to their advice about. Right there, personal data receipt is the Kantara consent receipt. That's where it fits into the agreement flow. You'll notice when I walked through it the first time, there was no person record. There was no independent record that you get to keep that evil corporation doesn't control on your behalf. Sorry, your service provider doesn't control on your behalf. Just like a sales receipt for financial purchases, a personal data receipt is all those things. It's a personal record. It's independent of the receipt issuer. It's some sort of evidence that something happened, and it's your record, so you rely on it. Metadata, obviously. And it points to the policy statements of the issuer. Very important. What was a privacy policy that you just agreed to 10 times before getting your Wi-Fi password? Anyone remember? Good. It lets you exercise your personal data rights. This is more of a kicker slide in GDPR-related contexts, because personal data rights are rights that you retain after the event has happened into the future. But it doesn't matter if you can't remember where you were when you gave up the information. These are actual implementations of consent receipts. The members of our work group are inventing ways to use this in their workflows and their data flows.
Two more.
Okay, I'm not going to show you the demo. If you'd like to see how these actually work, you have to come on Friday. But I'll give you an intro.
Yeah.
Okay, so imagine in a few years, well, depending on the audience, that could be, imagine in a few minutes you've agreed to 500 services. If your mobile apps are calling back home and providing personal data, that's minutes and hours, not years. If it's people, it's months, not years. Now what are you supposed to do? Where did I give out my personal data? Who's doing what with it? What did I actually agree to? Well, clearly, you open your Kantara Initiative Privacy Control Panel software, which is completely fake software, doesn't exist, you can't buy it, you can't download it. It's a concept that you've got a shoebox full of receipts about all your personal data that's spread out all over the place. Your dashboard, your control panel, lets you look into the shoebox and organize it in a way and give you action buttons to delete your data, inquire about it, instruct the processor to stop processing or do more processing, whatever you want. The demo will feature Kantara members that have participated in creating the specification. Friday.
Be there.
Really early in the morning.
Ouch.
And that's what I've got for today.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. That's terrific. And as we just transfer the clicker over there, hello.
Not yet.
Well, we were going to do questions right at the end. We have 11 minutes left, but that was can you hold it?
Sure.
Right? Go.
How do I
If
progress?
we try, we're going to probably load up the...
Oh.
Yeah. So that's
Okay.
what's happening. Can you talk to the first...
I can talk.
Yeah,
Sure, I can
okay,
talk to
they're
the
just
first
gonna
slide.
load up your
I made the
presentation.
slides. I better be able to talk to the slides.
Catherine, take it away.
So a couple things that are, oh, look, there it is.
Yeah.
A couple things that I wanted to bring the audience's attention to are some of the areas where Kantara focuses on that are driving. You've heard GDPR. That's a big driver in Kantara, obviously, with UMA and the receipts. The receipts actually also have a big play in the U.S., and I can talk to that later. One of the big drivers that we're seeing right now, just a couple days ago, the Office of Management and Budget released a memo. We always love their memos. They're just so exciting to read. And this memo directed the agencies within the federal government to get off of 800-632 and onto 633. So if you're familiar with NIST and that specification, this is guidance to the agencies saying, let's move forward, let's get into the new world and get on to 633. That's important. This is also interesting because they also say that they want the agencies to use commercially available products to leverage open, that's supposed to say APIs. They want the agencies to improve digital interactions with the American public. Who here has tried to work with the IRS online? Yeah, you know how that works.
How well did that go?
They don't do that. That doesn't work well for them. But any agency you want to interact with, it's very challenging to try to prove to them, I am who I say I am, and by the way, where's my refund going on in my life. They want us to do, the agencies need to do risk assessment. So everyone doesn't just have to be, identity proof to the utmost level. We're not all trying to access the NSA. Some of us are just really trying to do like mid-tier or low-tier identification or access events, I should say. And so our identity doesn't need to be at the nth degree. So these are just some things that are going on with the OMB encouraging the federal agencies to do this action.
Yeah, not only the OMB, actually, the GAO, Government Accounting Office as well, has just recently brought out something, so yeah.
So let me, who here has ever been a patient? Everyone raises their hand. So here's another regulation that is impacting you. There is a new regulation that is emerging. It's now in its second version, so TEFCA 2.0. TEFCA stands for Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement. There was a 21st Century Cures Act that was passed by Congress a couple years ago, and within that act, they said that the Health and Human Services shall create a trusted exchange framework for the exchange of healthcare information. So this is a requirement. Now, a health information network, you probably aren't aware of this, but when you get medical records, lab results, et cetera, this information is able to be exchanged with maybe your primary care physician, or maybe some information from CVS goes to your doctor. This information gets routed around about you. Now, unfortunately, what we have is this in the United States.
I think that's supposed to be a mess.
It is a mess.
In England, we would call it an Eton mess. But yeah.
It is the worst mess, but this is actually a pretty good diagram of what's going on. All of these health systems have to belong to like regional exchanges to make that information move around. If your health system is on, who's here from Cerner or Epic, if they're on one of those systems, maybe they can interoperate with one another, but it's a real mess. And so lots of hospitals and doctors' offices may belong to 10 or more exchanges to make this work. Imagine the old phone system where you wanted to call across the country. I'm talking like back in the day. If you wanted to make a national or international call, like that took like 10 minutes to set up. This is what we have today with health information exchange. So this is being replaced by this. This really nice diagram, which has a governing body, which has regional, what are called qualified health information networks who have to follow certain laws or regulations, and underneath them are the health systems, the different contributors or resource owners of your health information. So we're going to replace this ugliness with this new design. And we think that's going to be more secure. They call it a single on-ramp for nationwide connectivity. So that's all great, but then what does that mean to identity? What that means is, like, for today, you're all familiar, you go to your bank and you did that KYC, know your customer. That doesn't exist today in healthcare. There is no KYP, know your patient. But that's where we're going to, and that patients will now be identity proofed. So when you go to your doctor or you're a member of your health plan, your identity will be assured. So you can't just, make up or have a very low-level identity. It will be important to reach IAL2, Identity Assurance Level 2, as a patient. That also means that you will have to achieve AAL2. So as a patient, you would have a strong authenticator. So when you access your patient portal or your health plans portal, or even checking in for an appointment, or maybe doing a telehealth visit, all of the ways in which you identify yourself to a healthcare provider or payer, you will need to be assured in order to get access. One last thing is that there's a national patient identifier that may or may not be in the works. My personal opinion, not in the works. But the House has said that, yay, we really want to study this idea of a patient identifier. Every single person in the United States would get a national identifier. This is not going to happen, but we can talk offline. But that's another thing that's going on in Congress that you should be very afraid of. Okay, that's it.
And so hearing that, and then hearing about user-managed access and consent receipt from Kantara, as well as the assurance side, you can start to see why there's some interest from the healthcare community about the sorts of artifacts that Kantara has that would be useful. Right. With that, we are at the end. We've got a little bit more time. There was a burning question from Mr. Wilson. Sir.
Steve Wilson wearing my lobster.
Yeah. Do you need a mic, or can you just shout loud?
I'm going to shout at Andrew. Just expand on what you mean by the receipt being independent of the issuer. So I think a meaningful receipt's got to be stamped or signed by the issuer. So what's independent?
Right. So the presentation here was the short form presentation. So Steve asks, what do I mean by independent of the issuer? Shouldn't there be a link back to the issuer? The analogy would be with a paper receipt for a sales receipt. Is there a link from the paper receipt back to the issuer? Yes, by identifiers printed on the metadata and identifiers printed on the receipt. That's the same concept that independent of the issuer is. The receipt points at a record that's present at the issuer or vendor. If the issuer or vendor loses, modifies, deletes, makes inaccessible their copy, the person has an independent record that something happened, and enough information about that something that happened that they can take action, whatever that action happens to be. For the give me your email address so you can get Wi-Fi, no one's going to keep a receipt. For the give me your medical records for the next 5 years, continuously, I want a receipt.
Okay, so we have time just for a couple of more questions. We've got the panel here. Any questions from the audience for any of these folks? And sorry, I've got that light directly in my eye, so it's very hard to see. Any questions for any of these folks on anything that you've heard today? Am I hearing? Can I see anything? Because I have one which they're going to probably hate me for. So, but I'm actually going to start at the beginning, because Ian Glazer thinks on his feet so well. Giving you all. So this is an identity conference, right? So if you could think of of all the issues that you have in the identity space from your perspective, Ian, what's the number one thing we need to fix in the next 18 months?
Okay. I think what we have to do is get away from the piece parts and to the actual solving of the problems, right? We have in this industry been doing plumbing work for an awfully long time. And Pam Dingles says this, which is like we have probably in the last 18 months just got to the part where we can actually start solving meaningful business problems, and that's what we got to start doing. Which means
we're at the end of the beginning.
We're at the end of the beginning, which means we have to look to our peers in security and look to our peers in privacy, and look to our peers in the business, and say, what is the actual thing we need to do? Don't worry about the plumbing. Don't worry about how the service is delivered. Tell me the objective you want to get. Let's go do that thing together. Like, that's what time is to do now.
Thomas, any thoughts?
No, I'm going to pass.
So you're going to pass. Alec will have a view on this.
I think it's time to also turn over to the user and think about the user and the user experience. This whole plumbing is independent. I turn the faucets on, I wash my hands, I turn them off. I don't deal with the plumbing as a user. I think it's critical that we hide, we bake in, we actually strengthen the security of identity through a better user experience.
Perfect. Tim, your thoughts across the seas of many things you're dealing
Just
with?
quickly, the legal system and the commercial system both have needed the ability to enable user control of access rights to and informational rights. And UMA does that. It's amazing. So thank you again.
Okay. And Catherine,
Ditto.
Yeah, it's all been said?
It's all been said.
That's
Let's go.
good. Okay, and of course, he has to have the final word, does Mr.
So
Hughes?
at today's Identity 101 session, it was very good. What struck me in I work in the future, as do many of these people. We're working on what's coming next in the next 5 to 10 years, standards, protocols, software. What struck me in the session today was that it still had an enterprise flavor. So identity management is an enterprise software term. It's about your employees, contractors, and partners, and your customers. What we're working on is you as a person working on the internet with enterprises that have no relationship with you. So be aware that 5 years from now, there will be a lot of discussion about enterprise identity, but it's solved.
Yay! Well, hooray for that. Okay, with that, folks, we are all done. Thank you so much. Give yourselves and the panel a big hand. Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch and back later on. Kantara has a table down in the expo hall. Come and find us there if you want to talk some more. Thank you, everyone.